Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. We're here at the News Forum where all voices matter. In our series of interviews with Conservative Party leadership contenders, we welcome to Boom and Bust the Honorable Jean Charest. He is a former federal cabinet minister, Premier of Quebec, and legal counsel. He'll be able to outline his ideas and policies for the leadership race and for Canada. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Tony.
I guess the first obvious question is, since the last time you were in federal politics, Canada has changed immeasurably, obviously, actually even since you have been Premier of Quebec. What are the major differences you've noticed since starting your leadership run?
Well, there's a number of things. I think there's a very broad concern about the aging of the population, the impact on productivity, on innovation, our ability to deal with the development of our economy. I'm thinking of the resource sector in particular, Tony, has been a very big story over the last 10 years. Canada is because Mr. Trudeau has created a reputation of a country that can't get things done, which is sad. And I think thinking of pipelines in particular, that is one of the big stories of the last few years, and one that's talked a lot about in this leadership race for good reason.
Yeah, and obviously, the way I've been putting it to some of my guests recently, Canada doesn't seem to work very well anymore. You mentioned pipelines. I think of Pearson, what's going on at Pearson Airport, infrastructure, not really befitting in a G7 country. So what needs to change in that regard?
Well, there's going to have to be a major rethinking of how the federal government operates. Pearson Airport's a very good example. The federal government doesn't operate that many things, Tony. And you know, because you and I have both been at the provincial and federal level. The provincial level is the governments that operate the country on a day-to-day basis. The feds have a more narrow field. Airport's one of them, and they can't run them. I mean, it's a shame, but it's also on Mr. Trudeau that he's not able to get it right. And then you look at the bigger projects like pipelines, that really is on Mr. Trudeau because of his unwillingness to support big projects. So I think this calls for a real change in leadership if we're actually going to get the federal government to play the role it should play as an enabler, able to get these projects realized and done, align the interests of the provinces and allow the country to grow its economy.
Obviously, the other sort of big elephant in the room is affordability, inflation, interest rates, housing, all of these affordability/economic issues. I'm sure you've heard it on the road when you've been traveling as a leadership candidate. How do you see these kinds of issues being resolved?
Well, on inflation, there is going to have to be a longer term approach because we're going to have some inflation with us for a while. And it means that we need to do a number of things to address it. Reduce spending, because spending does feed inflation. Mr. Trudeau has been, a champion of spending, not of economic growth, but of spending, and continues to be so. The other thing that we could do is reduce personal income taxes, which is what I've done in the past when we had the Great Recession of 08-09, and to a lot of effect because it allowed people to increase their disposable income.
Right.
So those are among the things that we need to look at to reduce inflation and to move pretty rapidly on it because it takes time. It takes time, Tony, between the moment you make a decision like that and to see it actually make its way through the economy.
Housing's been a topic that's been touched on by most of the leadership candidates. Any thoughts on that?
Well, everyone agrees that the inventory issue is front and center. We need more houses, period. Now, there's incentives that we should offer as a federal government to allow more construction. And that means incentivizing the municipalities through our infrastructure program. They move more rapidly to build, to permit, to do it more rapidly. But one thing that I would also add to that, Tony, is that we should also have a fast track for the trade workers who work in the construction industry so that we have the people we need to build the house. You talk to the unions who represent these workers, private sector workers right now, they'll tell you there's shortages that really, really mitigate their ability to build a house.
Well, let's talk about that after the break. I think that's a really important point, how our immigration system could serve the country better, particularly when we're dealing with some job shortages, some labor shortages. We're going to come back right after the break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with the Honourable Jean Charest. He is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Jean, just before the break, we were talking a little bit about access to labor stock, labor mobility, how that intersects perhaps with our strategy for immigration, but even just getting people trained up. Give us a little bit more on your thoughts on that.
I'm very enthusiastic on the idea that Canada should become a destination for talent around the world. We have a unique opportunity to be the destination for either researchers, professionals, trade people who are looking for a place where they can deploy their talent. If we're smart about this, we can recruit the talent, and the key, though, is to integrate them. And those countries do it best have people who come here who are fully motivated to integrate on one hand, and we as a country fully motivated to integrate them. How does that happen? It happens through a job. It happens through learning the language. It happens through integrating in a community. And learning a job and having access to a job in Canada is recognizing credentials. And I did a deal with France when I was Premier of Quebec, the most advanced deal in the world, where you're a doctor in France, doctor in Quebec, engineer in France, and for 81 professions and trades. We should create a national platform, because it is a provincial jurisdiction,
right?
A national platform that would allow us to recognize those qualifications and integrate people very rapidly. We could do country-to-country deals. We could do sector-specific deals. Nurses from the Philippines, for example. We could do a deal with them where it says, if you're a nurse in the Philippines, you'll be recognized as a nurse in Canada. I'm very enthusiastic at the idea that we could do that. If we get it right, we will, as a country, stand out in terms of our economic growth and our ability to increase productivity.
I think you've probably had the same experiences I've had in provincial politics, in that there's a lot of folks who, in some of these trades and professions, don't want to see that accessibility and that openness to new professionals. So what can we do to break that down a little bit?
Well, we have to put a lot of pressure on those corporate interests.
Right.
It's at the worst of people who are blocking the access to others because they're trying to protect their field, and it's all wrong. I mean, that's exactly the wrong approach. We need to apply pressure, and the provinces will need to apply a lot of pressure on them to actually say, listen, either have to open up or we are going to do it ourselves and override whatever powers they have to make it happen. When I did it in Quebec, I applied huge pressure on every one of them so that they be part of it. And they had to come along because they knew in the end that I wanted to happen. But Tony, there is one of the points about leadership in the country that's missing with Trudeau. Unless the leader says this is a priority, and we're going to make it happen, all these big projects, these big changes don't happen because there's so much inertia out there that you need the political will to actually make things evolve.
Well, how would you assess, I mean, you're almost in a unique position to assess Mr. Trudeau's ability to work with the provinces. Has that been going downhill under his prime ministership, or are we laying too much of that at his feet?
I think we should lay all of it at his feet. He's been very divisive for the country. I don't, in what I've seen, I don't think there's been more than just, some single provinces. And I'll give you the latest example. He does this deal with Mr. Singh on spending more money because it's obvious for everyone, isn't it, Tony, that we all need to spend more money. I mean, as though we're coming out of COVID and record spending and we want to spend more. And where does he want to spend? In areas of provincial jurisdiction. Well, guess what? You and I know they're talking about pharmaceutical and dental. It's not going to happen. I can guarantee you one thing. You and I have been there, and you in the health responsibility. Do you think the provinces are really going to sign on to a federal proposal on dental care or pharmaceuticals, knowing full well that in 5 years from now, they'll say there's a crisis and pull out of the program and leave The province is holding the bag, which is in part what's happened on healthcare in general. So Mr. Trudeau doesn't seem to know how the system works. I think one of the advantages I bring to the race, given the experience I have as someone who's been a premier, I know how this system works. It'd be a breath of fresh air in Ottawa to have a prime minister who's been there and has the ability to make the system work to the benefit of the country.
We're going to continue our discussion with the Honourable Jean Charest after the break. Of course, he's running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Lots to discuss. Please stay with us. We'll be back very soon. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. My guest, of course, is the Honourable Jean Charest. He is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Jean, I want to go back to something that we were talking about a little bit and drill down a little bit, no pun intended, but there seems to be a real market for Canadian energy. We've got obviously the crisis and the invasion of Ukraine and a real opportunity, yet Joe Biden travels to Saudi Arabia to seek new oil deals, and we're kind of left being the bridesmaid, never the bride. Can you comment a little bit on that and what you see that has to change on that?
Tony, what is wrong with this picture? I mean, I can't. It's for a Canadian to see Joe Biden go to Saudi Arabia and to interact with a leader that he once denounced and said he didn't want to be seen in the same room with. We're next door. We're reliable. We are the most reliable, ethical partner that they could have. And yet, Mr. Biden doesn't want to do Keystone XL. Right. In my approach, I don't think Keystone XL is dead. I think we should continue to apply pressure and say to the Americans, who knows, there may be a change in administration, that they need to be a little more, a little smarter about this. By the way, when we did the trade deals, no one remembers this, but one of the big gives of Canada was to guarantee our American neighbor access in case of a crisis to our energy. I mean, only the best of friends would do that to another country. But for the longest time now, we haven't been able to do projects to be able to export. We need to diversify. That's a lesson from Biden also. Let's diversify. But again, you're going to find I'm persisting, but returning to Mr. Trudeau, when did you ever hear Mr. Trudeau say, we need to do Energy East? You and I know, we also know, there's no big projects get done unless the Prime Minister says, let's do this because it's right. As opposed to, well, maybe we'll do a project. And so the Americans, frankly, I don't think the story's finished. I think one day an administration will do the right thing and turn around and say, let's work with our Canadian neighbors, but let's also do the smart thing and not depend uniquely on an American market to whom we lose billions of dollars because we're selling our product at a discount also, which is insulting. So more to come on this, especially the war in Ukraine has shed light on the fact that we should be a responsible, ethical supplier. More to come on this. A new Conservative government's the only way I think we're actually going to get these projects done.
This conversation reminds me a little bit of some of the other world trends I'm sure you're following very closely. Obviously, Joe Biden, since the start of his presidency, has really focused in on supply chain, onshoring, friendshoring, as he calls it. His latest move was the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. 13 countries working together on supply chain and trade. Canada not there. You must have noticed that too. I'd love to get your commentary on that.
This was a subject that I raised in our debate in Montreal because it happened in the days following. It is a testimony to the failure of Mr. Trudeau in representing Canada. I find it difficult to believe that Mr. Biden actually convenes this meeting of 13 Indo-Pacific countries. The last time I looked, we are on the Pacific, does not invite Canada. Now, this is a framework proposal. It's not a trade agreement. Nonetheless, it's going to deal with, as you mentioned, supply chains and all that. Janet Yellen's new concept, I think she's the first one who coined it, of friendshoring.
Right.
We're supposed to be part of. And then the idea of data flow the environment, energy transition. And we're not only are we not, we could have been in the room at the end of the table. We're not even in the room. And so it's greatly disappointing. It points to the fact that we need to, on the international stage, we have a lot of catching up to do, Tony, because our voice just isn't heard anymore.
We've got a minute to go before this segment is over. Are you optimistic that we can do that with a change of government with you at the head?
I'm totally. No one gets up in the morning and says, I wonder what Canada's thinking today.
Right.
And that's not a knock against Canada. We have to go out there and hustle for everything we did. That's what I did with the Canada-Europe trade agreement, the agreement we did with France. We have to go out there and hustle very hard, but we have to be taken seriously. And to be taken seriously, we have to bring something to the table.
We're going to continue our discussion after the break with the Honourable Jean Charest, of course, former Premier of Quebec, former Member of Parliament and Cabinet Minister, but also candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Please don't leave. We've got one more segment to go. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Jean Charest. He is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Jean, one of the issues that obviously is one that comes up every election, as it should, is Indigenous peoples and their role in our economy and in our country that we share. And obviously, we need to make sure that they can share in the economy better. Have you got any policy planks on that one in particular?
Well, on the development of resources, Tony, I'm proposing that we create a Crown corporation that would be specifically focused on allowing Indigenous communities to invest equity in projects. I mean, that is the level at which they should be involved, that really commits them to the project in a way where the benefits will flow for a long period of time. It allows them to develop the expertise, the qualifications, the capacity, all the things that the communities need to develop to participate directly in our resource development. And when that happens, well, then the projects start to get done. The other things I was involved in was very much the Cree in northern Quebec.
Right.
And it's a very interesting experience because it's very leadership driven. The Cree have had very strong leaders through a succession of strong leaders. But what they did with the money that they invested from the James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement, which is the last treaty signed in Canada in 1976, was invest in economic ventures, building companies, housing companies, aviation company. I mean, there's a whole host of things they have been doing since then. And that's where we need to go. We need to keep our rhetoric in check in regards to creating expectations. Mr. Trudeau shot all of that through the roof on reconciliation and did not deliver. My view would be, let's really, really partner in a way that is respectful of the indigenous communities, and then we're going to see projects get done.
I'm going to turn to a slightly different topic, very important though as well. Last three election cycles, Conservatives have not done well with the under 35 age cohort, the millennials, and now Generation Z, the Zillennials. 3 election cycles. How do you see the Conservative Party taking a better, more successful approach with that huge part of the voting population?
And we haven't done well in areas like the GTA, the
Right.
Lower Manitoba, British Columbia, or Island of Montreal. And there's a number of common issues here. One of them would be our resource and economic and climate or environment policies need to be solid and credible. We can't go into an election campaign with a slogan. I mean, it has to be. And by the way, Conservatives need to claim their legacy on that. I mean, we did the most successful environmental treaties in the world. Montreal Protocol, the Clean Air Act. It's not as though we don't have a track record. We do. And contrary to the Trudeau Liberals, it's about getting things done. On an issue like that, Tony, we need to be credible, well thought out. And what I presented is a policy that is very realistic and allows us to be able to transition, deal with all the comprehensive things we need to do, carbon capture and storage, and hydrogen, blue and green biofuels, small modular reactors, all things that could allow us to develop expertise to export to the rest of the world. Those are the kind of things that will attract a younger generation. Housing affordability will be part of what they have on their mind. Also, dealing with the issue of inflation, they want to be able to do what every single generation gets done: work hard, buy a house, build a life, build a family. Daycare policies will count for them also. And I would maintain the agreements already signed by the feds with Doug Ford and with Scott Moe and others, but I'd also enhance it to allow those who are not in the public system to have access to tax credit. And I'd make family leave for over 2 years, and I would actually allow people to earn up to $20,000 on family leave without clawing it back, and integrate them more rapidly back into the labor market. Those are all there's a host of things that says we understand and we get the issues that you're dealing with, and here's how we are going to help you make the choices that you want to make, because the economic conditions will be right.
I want to thank our guest today, Jean Charest. He is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Jean, it's been great having you on the program. We wish you the best of luck, sir.
Great to see you again, Tony. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank Jean Charest for joining us today, another of the leadership candidates who have joined Boom and Bust to share their vision, mostly economic, but beyond that as well, for Canada and for the Conservative Party of Canada as they run for leadership. Stay with Boom and Bust as we continue to discuss these issues in the future. Thanks for watching.